The goals of carbon border adjustment mechanism are to prevent carbon leakage. So this is what we mentioned earlier, where if you have a domestic carbon price, you're often making it cheaper to import. And so the EU's done quite a lot of research that's demonstrated that their climate policies, including the emissions trading scheme, have led to an increase in cost of production, which has encouraged offshoring of manufacturing. So even as production of cement in the EU has decreased, import of cement has increased because the usage is going up. But there is now a business case to import rather than domestically produce. And this has led to a net increase of global greenhouse gas emissions, which has been caused by this carbon leakage, this offshoring of the dirty processes by regimes like the EU and the UK. And so carbon border adjustment mechanisms have been brought in as a policy tool. And it's not just about creating a business case for choosing domestic over imports. It's also about creating a driver for people producing in other countries to lower their emissions. And it's also a way of improving accounting, because if you have to report on the embodied emissions of your imported goods, you're giving the country that you're reporting into a much better picture of what its true carbon footprint is, because imports are one of the very important scope 3 sources of emission that's quite difficult for countries to track today. Just as a kind of reminder that the EU's goals are not just about climate protection, they're also about improving domestic competitiveness of the EU. I've put in a little quote from the EU Commissioner for Climate, Net Zero and Clean Growth. CBAM is seen as a win for both climate policy and competitiveness for the EU. And that's important to remember, that there are multiple drivers to these policies. So it's a relatively new policy tool. Global adoption has kicked off with the European Union. We are currently in a transitional period for the carbon border adjustment mechanism, and the reporting period will begin in earnest from January 1st next year. This will shortly be followed by the United Kingdom CBAM in January 2027. Norway and Switzerland are both examining ways to introduce CBAMs that are aligned with the EU's CBAM in order to reduce cross-border trade friction. Both of these countries are based in Europe, and so it does make sense that they try and align as closely as possible with their biggest trading partners. And then there's even been consultations in Canada and Australia looking at the potential for introducing a carbon border mechanism alongside domestic carbon reduction policies, but there's no concrete data out yet, so don't worry if you're trading with Canada and Australia just yet, but do keep an eye out.